there's a very easy way to break sleeper fantasy football. It's a strategy that's free and you can do it right before every single time you draft to get a leg up on your league mates when you're playing on sleeper fantasy football. But if you're playing on Underdog Fantasy Football, you know there are 12 teams per draft, which means every time you draft a team on Underdog, your team has about a 16% chance to advance to the next round and make some money just blindly running the numbers. Last season, my teams moved forward 26.9% of the time, meaning using my strategies, I was able to make my teams 1.68 times more successful than pure luck. And you can learn some of these strategies as well if you hit the subscribe button and follow along with everything that we're putting up on this channel. But hopping into what our strategy is going to be today for Sleeper Fantasy Football, what we're going to be doing is before you draft on Sleeper, go to Underdog Fantasy Football. If you don't have an account, sign up. It's free. Look at in the top left corner, there is rankings. You're going to click that, click on NFL, and you can see where the ADP is on Underdog Fantasy Football as opposed to on Sleeper Fantasy Football. And we want to use Underdog Fantasy Football ADP for a couple of reasons. It's sharper because they are giving out millions of dollars every single year, and the sharpest players are drafting on Underdog Fantasy Football. So the app where the most money is given out draws the best fantasy football players, meaning this ADP will be sharper than your more casual apps like ESPN Fantasy or Sleeper Fantasy Football. Another reason is Underdog Fantasy Football is drafting year round, so they are absolutely immediately up to date on any trades, changes, cuts, anything that happens in the NFL. Underdog ADP is already updated on it, which is why we want to use that instead of Sleeper, because sometimes Sleeper or ESPN lags behind. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the rankings and determine where the best values are based on if someone's going higher on Underdog Fantasy Football, but then lower on Sleeper, we know that that is a player that we want to target on Sleeper. Now, you could do all this research yourself, or I've already done the research for you. So let's hop right in here. This is going to be as of Friday, May 9th. So if you are not drafting now, we're going to redo this. Obviously, every couple of months, you're going to have to redo this to figure out the new values. But as it stands, when you're looking at running backs on Sleeper Fantasy Football, the guys you want to look at are your rookie running backs. These are guys that are going way too late in Sleeper drafts as compared to Underdog drafts. And those rookie running backs are going to be Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Ashton Genty, and Omarion Hampton. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson each going 20 spots lower on Sleeper than they are on Underdog Fantasy Football. So if you are drafting on Sleeper, make sure you are picking up those guys late in your draft. And as we can see who the good values are on Sleeper, we can also use Underdog's ADP to figure out who the players we want to avoid are. And the players here are J.K. Dobbins going 20 spots earlier on Sleeper than he is on Underdog Fantasy Football. Then Rico Dowdle is also going 19 spots higher on Sleeper than he is on Underdog. So these are both players that we want to fade at their current ADP when we are drafting on Sleeper. Then Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and Rashad White, also another group of bad values on Sleeper Fantasy Football. These are guys who were replaced by young rookie running backs, and Sleeper ADP is slowly adjusting to this. And if you are drafting this early, and I know for a fact people are drafting this early, make sure you are properly reacting to this change. Judkins is the starter, Henderson's the starter, and Omarion Hampton is the starter. If you are, don't draft those running backs if you are expecting a starting running back. So let's get into our next group of ADP here. It's going to be our quarterbacks. Our number one value, seems like he's a value on absolutely every single app there is. It's Justin Fields, Konami code upside, gets to play with his buddy Garrett Wilson again on a New York Jets offense, which you imagine is going to pass the ball more than the Pittsburgh Steelers did. He is in for a really big year. Underdog has him at quarterback 11. Probably is going to finish even higher than that. Most experts have him rated as a top 8 quarterback. So he's a value on Underdog, but forget about that. On Sleeper, he's going off the board at quarterback 25. Justin Fields is a must draft for anyone drafting on Sleeper Fantasy Football right now, going 14 spots lower on Sleeper than he is on Underdog. Our other quarterback values are going to be Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy. These are two guys with some level of uncertainty, but their situations both got better this offseason. Caleb Williams receiving Colston Loveland and Luther Burden in the draft, and then some O-linemen in free agency, and then J.J. McCarthy. What happened to him? Oh, yeah, he was named the starter. So that's pretty good for his fantasy value as it increases from the last season. Now, the worst quarterbacks to draft, they're a little bit strange here. Not really sure why, Watson and Levis are being drafted at all, but let's look at the guys who are actually relevant here. Derek Carr, a bad value on Sleeper Fantasy Football by 8 spots. Anthony Richardson going off the board at quarterback 21 on Sleeper. Using this strategy, it marks him as a bad pick. I personally believe that Anthony Richardson is a really good risk to take at quarterback 21 because, you're only going to be taking 24 quarterbacks in the draft. If you're doing a 12-man league, people aren't going to take a third quarterback. So Anthony Richardson, ADP coming off the board as a low quarterback 2 when he could finish as a high quarterback 1. I love that risk. I'm all in on that risk, but according to this strategy, he is not a smart pick. Then we have Shedeur Sanders going off the board. Everywhere other than Underdog has Shedeur Sanders coming off the board way too early. People are going to be excited to draft him. I see him going in the second round of Dynasty Leagues. He's a 5th-round quarterback. The history says he's going to be a bust. We haven't had a day 3 quarterback start week 1 since 2014 when Dak Prescott did it. The odds are that Shedeur Sanders is not the next Dak Prescott. Going down, some more bad picks on Sleeper Fantasy Football. These aren't horrible picks, but there just is better ADP and better values to attack. That's Jordan Love, Tua, and Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, all going off the board 5 spots lower or 5 spots higher on Sleeper Fantasy Football than they are on Underdog. So those are quarterbacks who we want to be avoiding when we are drafting on Sleeper Fantasy Football. Now, moving on to our tight ends. Number 1 guy, someone who is a value on everything other than Underdog, is going to be Brenton Strange. If you don't know who Brenton Strange is, absolutely makes sense. He is a young tight end out of Penn State, got drafted in the 2nd round 2 years ago, the same year that Luke Musgrave and Sam Laporta came out. He was drafted in the same round, that 2nd round, to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but was stuck on the depth chart behind Evan Ingram, their star tight end. Evan Ingram's not there anymore. When Brenton Strange was the starter last season, he put up some decent numbers when he played, and people are getting excited to draft Brenton Strange. The reason why I love drafting Brenton Strange, other than the fact that he is not even being drafted on Sleeper. I put in 100 just kind of as an arbitrary number. I wasn't even willing to go down and count how far what Sleeper tight end Brenton Strange was. Wasn't even worth my time. The dude's basically free in Sleeper drafts. Pick him up in free agency or draft him with your final round pick. He is going to be a boom or bust guy. Complete unknown when it comes to Brenton Strange, but we've seen a little bit from him, and we know it's an offense, that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Historically, their tight end 1 has been successful, although their new coach, Liam Cohen, just came from Tampa Bay, where Cade Otton wasn't extremely successful last year, but at this ADP, I love taking a chance on Brenton Strange. Now, moving on to our next values, we have all the rookie tight ends. We have Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, Tyler Warren, and just under, the last guy got cut off was actually Elijah Arroyo. So all your rookie tight ends coming off the boards. Sleeper very slowly reacting to these rookies. Colston Loveland, of course, with the Chicago Bears, very high upside. Coming off the board is Underdog tight end 9, so a tight end 1, but you can get him as a tight end 3 currently in Sleeper. In 2 months, I promise you this will change, but he still will be a value. So Colston Loveland 17 spots high. Mason Taylor 16 spots lower on Sleeper than he is on Underdog. 2nd round tight ends, we really love to take a shot on those guys. The hit rate in the 2nd round for long-term fantasy success is better in the 2nd round than it is in the 1st round. Then you got Terrence Ferguson. He is currently a backup, so who knows how good he's going to be for redraft, but we see he is marked as a value by this metric here. Then we have Tyler Warren going to the Indianapolis Colts. Hate the landing spot, but you cannot deny the value at coming off the board at tight end 20 on Sleeper and 11 on Underdog. I think if you're drafting him on Sleeper, definitely someone you want to go ahead and target. Anything as a tight end 1, I'm in on Tyler Warren. So I do like that 11 on Underdog as well. Moving over to our tight ends going way too high on Sleeper. It's going to be Noah Fant, Cole Kmet, is your worst tier coming off the board. Noah Fant going 17 spots higher on Sleeper, and Cole Kmet going 15 spots higher on Sleeper. These are two guys who were, replaced. I say that because Noah Fant is definitely still the starting tight end for the Seattle Seahawks. Elijah Arroyo is going to be sitting on the bench to start the season. So Noah Fant is still someone that you can draft if you're in some sort of tight end premium league or something where you a really deep league, maybe a start two tight end. You can still draft Noah Fant. Now, Cole Kmet, that's the guy you want to avoid. Colston Loveland with a top 10 draft pick. The plan is to start Colston Loveland immediately. Don't draft Cole Kmet. Talented player, but the opportunity just won't be there on a depth chart that is already overfilled with offensive receiving talent. Continuing going down here, Taysom Hill is the next worst value on Sleeper. Everyone knows what Taysom Hill is at this point. Boom or bust. Going higher on Sleeper than on Underdog. Sharp drafters are not high on Taysom Hill. Then we have a rookie tight end, Harold Fannin, going at 30. Tight end 30 on Sleeper, but tight end 36 on Underdog. Fannin is going to be a backup behind the talented David Njoku. I don't see myself drafting any shares of Harold Fannin Jr. in redraft this year. Then we have Pat Freiermuth and Hunter Henry are soft do not drafts, both going 6 spots higher on Sleeper than they are on Underdog. The thing with Pat Freiermuth and Hunter Henry, they are just, they are a tight end 2 that you pair with an elite tight end, and you want to fill them in on that bye week. So if you have Kittle or Bowers or McBride, you want to draft pretty much the cheapest tight end 2 that you can find, or just stream it. You probably don't even have to use a draft pick on Pat Freiermuth or Hunter Henry. We know what they are at this stage in their career. We're hoping for a tight end, maybe 12 or 10 finished out of these guys, but they're most likely not even going to be able to get that high. So sliding into our final position here is going to be our wide receivers. And unfortunately, as I put up the wrong thing, unfortunately, wide receivers, there isn't a ton of ADP for us to actually take advantage of. Xavier Worthy is coming off the board on Sleeper as wide receiver 33, but the sharp drafters on Underdog Fantasy Football have him coming off the board at wide receiver 21. Wide receiver 21, you are definitely paying full price for Xavier Worthy. So this strategy dictates that Worthy is the best pick at wide receiver, but I would go ahead and say Calvin Ridley is actually going to be your first pick. Calvin Ridley coming off the board as Sleeper wide receiver 38. And for a guy like this who is on the offense with the number 1 overall pick in Cameron Ward, he has all the boom potential in the world. Calvin Ridley does. He is someone who is being drafted as a wide receiver 3, but it is not, there's a 50-50 chance that he finishes as a wide receiver 2, and you're drafting him very late in drafts. So definitely someone that I'm excited to take a chance on. And then your last wide receiver soft value here on Sleeper is going to be Rashee Rice, coming off his ACL situation, coming off his also legal issues. We are going to get more information closer to the season, which will dictate how much Rashee Rice we really want to draft. Unfortunately, with this ADP for wide receivers, that didn't really tell us who to draft. It told us more who not to draft. And looking at our worst values, Brandon Ayuk and Michael Pittman Jr., these are both players who have name value, so more casual players on Sleeper are excited to take these guys late because they see wide receivers and they go, oh, I know that name. He's been successful recently. I'll just draft him. But obviously the sharper drafters on Underdog tell you that Michael Pittman Jr. and Brandon Ayuk are not good picks at that ADP. Michael Pittman Jr. coming off the board at wide receiver 54, which is such a fall from grace from a guy who just 2 years ago finished as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. But Anthony Richardson is a really bad quarterback in terms of producing fantasy relevant wide receivers. So Michael Pittman Jr. is in trouble being stuck in that offense. Brandon Ayuk is coming off a torn ACL, another guy coming off a torn ACL. So both guys who are bad values when you're drafting on Sleeper, you're going to want to go ahead and let someone else draft these guys. But on Underdog, Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver 54, I think it's a good pick. I'm not really sure what you have to lose at that point, but we're going to continue to go ahead down the board here. We got some of your bad values on Sleeper are going to be Chris Olave, Khalil Shakir, and then Josh Downs. Josh Downs also stuck on the Indianapolis Colts. don't read too much into it. If you're on Sleeper, don't draft any Colts wide receivers. Chris Olave, everyone can see the talent. I mean, the dude's extremely talented, but he's still stuck on the New Orleans Saints offense. Still has concussion issues. He's gotten a concussion the last 3 years of his career every single year. That's not a good thing. He's still going to have Derek Carr as his quarterback unless Derek Carr is hurt. History tells us that a second round Tyler Shuck is going to be a worse quarterback than Derek Carr, but you could also argue that that if Tyler Shuck is the quarterback, that gives uncertainty to Chris Olave. So he is a good guy to draft, but wide receiver 24 is too high to be taking Chris Olave on Sleeper. On Underdog, I love the risk of Chris Olave at 33. Now, George Pickens and Chris Godwin are going to be our next, or some more bad wide receivers who you do not want to draft on Sleeper. George Pickens, I want to see how the market reacts to this new Dallas Cowboys trade. George Pickens now going from the Steelers, a run-first offense where he was a wide receiver 2, to the Dallas Cowboys, a pass-happy offense where he's the wide receiver 2. I think just yesterday, George Pickens was coming off the board on Underdog as wide receiver 40, and he's starting to move up. I expect him to continue moving up as people enjoy the fact that he's joining an offense with a really good quarterback in Dak Prescott. So George Pickens, someone who's going to be moving up boards, but let's see how far he goes. He probably won't be moving out of this range in the red. And then just finishing us off here, Jerry Jeudy, Cooper Kupp, two guys who there's not a whole lot to talk about them, but they're both going 6 spots higher on Sleeper than they are on Underdog Fantasy Football. So not someone that we are going to be interested in drafting at ADP when we're playing on Sleeper. But that's what I got for today. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new, and have a great day.